Welcome to another episode of Unconditioned Mind. Unconditioned Mind is a project of Awakened Global, which is a movement that seeks to contribute towards gender and racial inequality. And this season, we're doing a leadership series, talking to seasoned leaders so that we can really get their wisdom around the challenges that are facing us as a country. I have an exciting guest for you today, Antony Ball, a good friend of mine. We've been working together for a long time. I'm so excited about this conversation. Maybe, Antony, you can start by introducing yourself. Who are you? Where are you? Just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll delve into the interview itself.
Thank you, Nonku. Very honored to be here. Thanks for inviting me. A bit intimidated, but I'm going to give it a go. So I'm South African, born in the Eastern Cape, in Gobodo, my hometown. I feel my roots are important to me, so I've got family and friends that are down there. And spent most of my childhood there, and then studied at various places. And really, since about the age of 25, I've been a Joburger. So I feel Joburg is also very much part of me too. And I do what else family-wise. I'm married, kids, grandkids, the whole story. I've been married for 40 years.
Wow!
And thank you. It's a lovely, lovely wife. And I've got 3 gorgeous kids and 4 even more gorgeous grandkids, which keep me very grounded around sort of family life.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have a lot of young people, who follow me, young professionals, and they look at us and they think, we've made it, they'll never reach there. And conversations like this, they show them that, no, we started somewhere. We had to grow, we had to face challenges like everybody else. So maybe you can just share with us your incredible journey as an entrepreneur, someone who has built business, and just start it from that beginning. How did you even start that journey?
Thanks, Nonku. I found that as I get older, I talk more. So it feels like, grandpa's allowed to talk. So you can stop me if I carry on for too long. But, one does get reflective on one's journey. And I do also share your view that young people do find challenges in getting going. And it leads me to a couple of conclusions. I think one is that I think we are very much a creature of our times. And I feel I was extraordinarily blessed in a certain way, given my times, when I was born and where I was in the world when things unfolded. So, and I do think for a lot of younger people now, let's call it, the opportunity set is very different, and I think more challenging in many ways. So I've got a certain amount of empathy for where the youth find themselves now. But you're absolutely right. However fortunate you might find your circumstances, there are always challenges and obstacles that one's got to get through. In my particular case, I'll own up to the fact that I was extraordinarily blessed, not just in terms of timing, but I grew up in a lovely family that gave me values. And I think in a South African sense, also a progressive family that sort of opened my eyes up to our challenges and the wrongs that were going on in our society. And the sorts of encouragements they gave us to deal with them are sort of very much part of me as well. So I do have this great belief that we are very much also then a function of how we brought up.
Yes.
So as a grandfather, I'm allowed to say to people when I hire them, I want to know about you, not what on your CV. I want to know where you were born, mom and dad, sisters, how family life worked. Tell me, for example, your car, is it kept clean? I get some silly little old hoaxy things, which will tell me sort of how you were brought up and what your value system is, because it's all a function of, frankly, of how we were brought up.
Yes.
And so I think that that's a sort of starting point. If you, for me anyway, extraordinarily blessed with wonderful mom and dad, siblings, in quite a small town environment. So it wasn't as hustling and bustling as Johannesburg is, and in a community of people that were supportive. So that meant an awful lot to me in my journey. I was also very fortunate to go to a school in Makanda, Grahamstown as it was then. So, and again, it was like a frontier type school. It's St. Andrew's College in Grahamstown. And I think, again, the values that you're imbued with and being in a certain environment as Grahamstown was also sort of quite instrumental in my upbringing. And I was then fortunate. I got to UCT and had 4 glorious years at UCT. And then I guess if I look at sort of breakout opportunities for me, I think one was that I was able to get a scholarship to go to Oxford, and I had 2 wonderful years at Oxford, which were really for me probably less about the learning, but just more about sort of opening one's eyes to the world. And this little boy from PE ends up in Oxford with people from all over the world that you're studying with and making friends with people all over the world. That was for me a big kind of, in a sense, an awakening of what the world was and what the opportunities were, and seeing people, go off and work for global investment banks and some of the big corporations of the world. So that was a big opportunity for me. I then came back to South Africa in 1985. And the story I often tell about coming back to South Africa was that being in the UK from 83 to 85, one will know that it was very difficult times in the UK. It was right in the middle of the miners' strike and Maggie Thatcher and her policies. And for pretty much the whole year, the miners were on strike in the UK. And they would characterize it as probably the most calamitous event post-war for the United Kingdom. And in the course of that, 2 people died. It was a scab labor that were going into a mine, and someone threw a concrete block on the taxi. Anyway, I came back to South Africa in August of 85, and I'll never forget it. In my first week, our gold miners went on strike, and 25 people were shot dead on the first day. And then we had the state of emergency and all the drama. And I nearly went scampering back to the UK. This was going to all be too much. But I think part of it was just a realization that, you're part of a society. You have many blessings that it imbues on you. And I felt very motivated, and my wife, to stay and build our lives here. So we've been here ever since.
We are still here.
I'm still here. And all my kids are here. And my grandkids are here. And I often say, you're one of the very few old white guys you find that can say that my family is all very rooted in South Africa. So we believe in its future and kind of very engaged in doing what we can to make it a better place. So I then started a career at Deloitte, and again, super fortunate because it was the time that the accounting firms were going into consulting. I arrived at Deloitte and there were 7 consultants, if you can believe it. I mean, they've probably got thousands now.
Wow.
But at that time, we sort of went from that would have been 85 until I left in 1990. We went from about 7 people to about 300 people. So again, if you can't find an opportunity in that, then it's your fault. So I did, yeah.
So when you left for the UK, you were already a CA, finished articles and all of that?
I'd done 2 of my 3 years of articles. So my first year, technically, I was articled. But I'd had to break articles to go and do it. But they penalized me. They made me do another year. But I was fortunate because I was able to do that without ticking and bashing. I got into the
you were lucky to go into consulting fresh from articles.
Very lucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that was the nature of it. When I talk about good fortune, being on the back of a tailwind where you've got consulting, you'll know better than me, because the firms have got thousands of consultants now. But at that time, it was a very small nascent thing. So I was just very fortunate to be there at the start of this rapid growth of consulting. So I had it was 5-6 great years there. And I'll talk to good fortune. It's hard to avoid race and gender in South Africa, so yes. I'll talk about it. So, I often talk about it in this way: is that if one reflects, I'll absolutely own up for having had opportunity at the expense of other people. So, for example, when I got my Rhodes Scholarship, it was the year before it opened to women, so it was men, and I went to a school where there were no black kids at the time.
Wow!
So it was. By definition, then it was white boys.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have got the scholarship if it opened to black people and to women. I don't think I would have got it. So that makes you reflect that someone else didn't get it, and I did get it. So it imbues you with a certain sense of obligation, I think, to the future. And then in my time at Deloitte, I thought it was that there were 100 partners, but and I thought it was 100 partners. What I do remember is there was 1 black partner, and there was 1 woman out of 100, and the rest were white men.
When was this now?
I made a partner in 1988. So the black partner became a friend of mine, a guy called Jeff Van Rooyen. And Jeff, I bumped into him about 6 months ago, and I was reflecting on this. And he said, "Antony, you're wrong. There were 200 partners and 1 black guy and 1 woman, 1 white woman." So, people it's often interesting just to reflect on these things. How bad it was, and we can comment on some progress, because I'm quite sure the demographics would have changed a lot in Deloitte over that time. And I know it is a long time. It's call it 40, 50 years, but it is that's as it was then. But again, with the point I make is I was made a partner in 1988 at the age of 29, and had it been that it'd been a firm that was open to everyone, I'm not sure I would have made a partner, but I was made a partner, and that was again at a young age, getting opportunity to lead and to build a business, which I did for Deloitte's for a couple of years, was actually a great opportunity. We built a strategy consulting unit, which we called the Strategy Group, and one of the things I did there was I battled to get clients. You've built a business, a number of businesses, and getting clients is the hardest part.
Yes.
And so at the time there was two McKinsey consultants called Peters and Waterman that wrote a book called In Search of Excellence. It was a best-selling book at the time, and I noticed they had no trouble getting clients. So my partner at the time, a guy called Steve Asbury, and I, we wrote a book called The Winning Way, which was a similar theme, is looking at great performing South African companies and trying to distill from that what was the essence of that made them great. And so our practice took off. I mean, we went from about 5 people to about 40 people in the space of about a year or two. And so I encourage people to write books, because all of a sudden people think you know something. I don't know if you find that not good.
Yes.
But people do think you're an expert who wrote a book. But that was a great opportunity. And my learning from that was this thing about whatever business you do, sales are vitally important. And without sales, you don't have a business. So to actually put yourself out there, put yourself in the public space, write something, and be sort of edgy about promoting your business is very, very important. I had a great experience there. Then I started believing that the work we were doing for companies was interesting, but not very remunerative, because you get paid a fee at the end of all of this, and if it all works out, it becomes a very valuable company. So I'd seen the emergence of the private equity investing in the US and the UK at the time, which is really the pioneering countries that did it. And a friend and I developed an idea of doing the same thing, of starting a private equity business. So we did that I left Deloitte's. The spark for me was February 1990, and when the unveiling of the ANC, and everything's going to be great. This country's going to normalize. So on the back of that, I resigned, and I said, I'm going to start a business. This is now a new future for the country, and it's all very exciting. And so I resigned from Deloitte in February 1990.
I just want to tap on that. I mean, at that time when these changes were happening, most white people were fearful that, this change is going to create, a difficult environment for them, which, I mean, we can look now from the rearview mirror, it didn't happen. Just talk to us around your thought processes around you saw opportunity instead of doom, as most people were. Yeah. How did you think like that?
As I say, I think so much of it is about how you grew up. And I grew up in a progressive family that were troubled by what was happening. I had 2 brothers that immigrated by that time. And my parents had encouraged them to immigrate because not seeing a future for the country. And so and I would say for more white folk than one thinks, they saw this as the start of a golden era.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very much so. That this was, I would say that for a lot of progressive white South Africans, this was seen as it's what we've been waiting for. It's what we've been calling for. And so we will get into a normalized society where our children can grow up in a normalized society, shoulder to shoulder with everyone in the country. And I have to say, it was bumpier than we thought it was going to be, but that's the nature of
change.
Of change. It's the nature of change. But it was very much a belief that we're going into this kind of golden era now, where South Africa is going to be able to go out to the world, show off our best colors, inspire leadership, political leadership, and undo the wrongs of the past. And you'll find that this country now is not a country of 4 or 5 million white people. It's a country of 60 million people with this incredible talent and energy. And so it was with that enthusiasm that I resigned and said, look, we're going to start this business. We're going to go into a golden age here in South Africa.
Okay. You decided to go into a new environment, something you don't know. Because they normally say you go into business because you've been exposed, you know something about that, you've built a network and so on. But you decided to jump into an ocean you didn't even know. First of all, why were you not afraid to start something completely new? And secondly, you can, share, because people don't want to do that.
Sure.
They don't want to go into the unknown.
Sure. So look, Nonku, what I'd say is that, and I'd encourage people to believe this, is I think there's something vital about being resourceful and having something that someone's going to want to buy from you. So I had a great confidence that if the worst came to the worst, I had clients, I had a certain skill, I'd be able to sell time, to people. So that was for me the backstop. I mean, I just had my second child. I didn't have. I mean, at the time, I could have lived for 2 or 3 months, and that was it. I didn't have resources. So, but I had a great belief that if this didn't work out, there were people that would pay me, X per hour to actually work. So that was my kind of backstop. So I think it's always good to have a skill that you believe someone's going to value and pay for. It's like a backstop to whatever you do. The other was that I had actually done a transaction in my time at Deloitte. I'd invested in a clothing company in the Western Cape with the blessing of Deloitte, and I put together a small consortium of people. So I'd kind of tested this thing, and it was sort of working, and I enjoyed it. And and the investor that I brought in was open-minded to supporting us. So we didn't have a commitment, but we had a sort of an interest, let's say, from an investor that we thought would support us. And the final thing is I had a partner who knew more than I did.
Okay.
So that all of that left me with a lot of confidence that we'd be able to make this thing work, and we did. So we started, and we were able to get a small fund together within about 6 months. It was an insurance company that's gone called FedSure, and they allocated 50 million rand to us, and we flattened that in a year. We made about 7 investments in a year.
Wow.
And again, talking about good fortune, because it was those years where you're right, there were some nervous people, and you'd find, at the time he had a business and he owned all of it and he was worried about the future. So he's happy to sell 30% and take his money somewhere else. And those are the kind of deals we did where people were, just as an insurance policy on the future, were happy to sell down a bit. And we did made some great investments in that time. Some not so great ones as well, but it encouraged the investor to do another 50 and then another 50 and then another 50. And then by the time we got to our democratic elections, we had the great opportunity to then take this to the world, and we were able to then go and raise a fund largely from US investors.
Wow.
About $150 million. And again, it's good fortune, because the story I often tell is that in going to raise this money in America, I felt like a Mandela child. I was this 34-year-old white boy, and with the blessing of this great leader. And so people were happy they were interested. This is interesting. This is South Africa. South Africa is coming to the world. Here are these young guys that have got a business idea. We'll put some money behind them. Mm-hmm. And one of our early investors was a firm called Common Fund. And Common Fund used to manage the endowments of educational institutions in the US. And I'll never forget, after they invested with us, they had a picture of me and my partner, Terry, on their front page of their quarterly. And the title was "The Insiders at the Coming Out Party."
Oh, wow.
So again, I talk about good fortune, is that you then went to the world in 1995 with promise and prospect, and telling the story about the investment environment in South Africa. And so we were able to raise that fund, and we did. We raised it and funded really well.
So did you have connections in America? Did you just go there cold?
We did 2 things. So one was we found a partner, minority partner, a guy called Tom Barry, who had been a CEO of Rockefeller & Co. And we found him, it was fortuitous, but we were looking for something. I said, I want an uncle in New York. And he was a bit like that. He was a bit older than us, and he knew his way around the city. And so we took him on as a partner. And then what that led to was we there was a South African that ran a big securities firm called DLJ, which subsequently merged, so it's gone now. And he had come to South Africa to look at opportunity, and we got them to be our placement agent. So we got a placement agent, we had a partner, and they kind of then showed us the road, and we went to raise the money. So, but I didn't think I'd been to New York until the start of that. So it was all very, very fresh to us. And I often feel that, so I would say from about 1995 until I personally stopped raising money in 2006, I probably went to the US about 100 times.
Wow.
So, and I tease people that if you look on my knees, you'll see thick pads of skin from being on my knees in America begging for money. And I think there's something that comes from that's been deeply enriching. I mean, one is that I so believe in the US capital market system. It's the only place in the world where they would have given these young guys money.
Yes.
We went to Europe. Who's the institution behind you? In America, it's about people. Yeah, we back these guys. They've got a story. Give them some money. Give it a go. So it's got this incredible capacity to back individuals like no other country I know. The flip side of it is you've got to be slick in your story. You can't. And I feel that I'll never forget the first big meeting we went to was New York State pension fund, massive pension fund. So we go in there, and the chief investment officer asks us a question of how things are going in South Africa. So I give a South African answer. Yeah, they're going fine. And the guy got me by my collar afterwards, our placement agent. He says, you must understand, you're in America now. When someone asks you that question, you say, it's great. Everything's fantastic. Because they're going to discount what you say anyway. So if you start out by giving an authentic answer, you're going to get nowhere. So you kind of learn a little bit about spin and storytelling and ability to get your message across. So I think that was very productive, and I feel that's been a very kind of enriching thing for me in terms of, you and I have once had this conversation about how important it is to kind of sell your story.
Yes.
And so we see that a lot. And I think that I do feel in my subsequent, people tell me this, but it's not a deliberate thing, but I think I've got quite good at convincing people to come along with me. There's something exciting in front of us, and to show, not in an unauthentic way, but in a way where one can get a glass half full view of whatever the opportunity set is. So that was terrific. I had about 10, 11 years of doing that.
Wow.
And then in 1998, when we were to raise our second fund, you may recall we had a bit of a capital markets boom in South Africa, and we felt we needed to try and become the next Investec or the next RMB. So we merged our business with a trading bank, and that became Brett. And there we learned lots of lessons. Our partner, Terry, decided that we wanted to nurture this private equity thing, and we got a leader to come and run this business for us, and it didn't work out. So we learned this lesson. This capital markets are funny things. They'll bless you with possibility, but when they correct quickly. And honestly, within a month of us putting this deal together, the Russian crisis, and then our interest rates went up to 25%, and this thing just crashed. Our share price went from around about 55 Rand to, 10, 12 or something like that. So we learned a few lessons, but I just got to say that I could talk for hours on this thing, but there's that journey with Brett. Very quickly I went to run it because the leadership wasn't working out, and learned sort of many lessons on the way through. And I think one of the lessons I've learned that I do try and impart on others is to try and be as analytical as you can about what you are and what your capabilities are and where you excel. And no one's the full bottle.
Yes.
And for me, I've learned I'm actually not a great CEO. I'm hardworking, and I'm diligent, and energetic. I'll try my best, but there are things I don't have. And so I was quite keen to not be a CEO. So I decided in 2011 not to be CEO, but to do something else. And I could go into more detail, but I think essentially this thing about knowing, what your superpowers are and what your frailties are and where you're at your best and where you get your energy from, I think are really important lessons, because what that will do is it'll help you put yourself in situations where you're going to excel.
Yes.
And I must say, one of the things that I feel I've been able to do a lot of, with these realizations is to commit the time and energy to figuring out what people are and where they're going to excel, and try to create an environment that brings the best out of them and doesn't deal with the insecurities and their fears and the things they might not be great at. So in doing that to myself, I kind of ended up doing something different and finding myself in a situation where I do more sort of portfolio things. I take on things that don't require running things, but where I can actually express myself in a way that brings the best out of me and not the worst.
So just going back to that story of the crash, I mean, you are going into business and everything goes wrong. I mean, that's not what we want. And normally people respond by, thinking that it's all doom now. Yeah. How did you survive that time and come out of it?
So I'll come back to that, but I reckon there are probably about 4 crises I had on the way through. We had that, then we had the second-tier banking crisis. That's probably the biggest. But I think that I do think it's really important to, in all of these crises, it's again about knowing yourself, is to try and see possibility when things are dark. And there will always be possibility. But it is true that in every crisis there's a silver lining as well. And so I think it's very, very important to do that. And it's very important, in my view, for leaders to talk to that, because you find that the troops get very despondent. And if the leader's looking like his shoulders, are rounded and his head is down, everyone's going to feel that. So I think I used to try and get up in the morning, go for a run, have a shower, put my best suit on, put my best tie on, brush my hair nicely, go into the office and feel like you're strong. I think you've got to do that as a leader. It sounds like small stuff, but I think it's really important to keep on with a positive disposition around things. And it can be debilitating because very often you feel like the odds are loaded against you, but to keep a positive spirit, I think, is really, really important as a leader. And we see that, if we look at our political leaders or the leaders of civil society, it's, and I also think of all the CEOs that I work with. One of the greatest traits I find is the CEOs that actually, keep the chin up and keep the shoulders straight when there's adversity. It's really important that they have that.
Wow. So maybe just share a little bit more around how we then expanded and
Great,
yes.
Yeah. So then from so we did the deal in 98. We started out with a trading bank and a private equity business. So what we did was to expand. In addition to the trading bank, we developed a corporate finance business, investment banking business as well, a lending business. So we expanded the banking operations quite a lot. And then in the private equity side, we raised successive funds. So we raised more funds. We sponsored the formation of some new funds, which mostly have separated from Brait, but there's immediate capital was also, I call it, derivative of what came out of Brait. Vantage was something that also became out of Brait. So we sponsored a number of mostly black-owned fund managers that spun out of that as well. So that was part of our growth plan. And then what we also did was we started a hedge fund business, which the first of the big hedge funds in South Africa we started. So we're trying to position ourselves as a specialist asset management firm that had also a bank and lending and a whole environment around it. Very much like you would have seen the specialist operations like that in the US. And that became our strategy. So we went from a team up when we started of about 60 people up to about 250 people. And then the second-tier banking crisis came. And we had to close our bank down. So that we shrunk back to something. So that was a really difficult period we went through. I'll never forget it because what happened, there's a rating downgrade of a second-tier bank. It was about 2001 or 2002. And what happened is Jill Marcus was deputy governor at the time, was in charge of bank supervision, and each of these banks got called in one after the other. And I'll never forget going with my chairman, Mervyn King, at the time, to summon to that big building in Tshwane and meeting with her. And I was saying to Mervyn on the way, Mervyn, we're not going to be told what to do. We're big guys. We're going to actually stand up here and tell them that we're in a position to weather this thing. And so we sit down and Jill looks at us and says, so what are you going to do? So I said, well, Governor, we've got options. You have no options. So anyway, we ended up having to close the bank down. But it was, if you think about closing a bank down, you've got depositors and you've got assets a little bit stickier on the other side. So it was quite a process to go through, but we did. We navigated that quite well. And then that got us into just the specialist asset manager that hedge funds and private equity and essentially a range of third-party funds. And then as we got into raising what would have been, I think, our fifth fund, and we were finding quite a few headwinds. It was, you should say, the South African story just got more complicated.
Yes.
I recall, you can think of it, we go to America and the first question you get is, why has your president got so many wives? And, so you spend 10 minutes dealing with that. And then you'll get asked another question that seems so irrelevant to the investment case. So we had all of these footnotes, as I described it, and the list of footnotes just got longer and longer. So we hit some quite heavy weather raising our next fund. And so that got us to sort of late in 2010. We thought it's just not worth it. So we morphed Brait into something where it was a listed company. So we raised, it was $1 billion at that time. That time was about 7 billion rand. And as new capital into Brait and turned Brait into an investment holding company. And at that time, I took the opportunity to gap it. I'm not a CEO. There's someone better here for this sort of thing. John Nodder, he ran it. And I went non-executive at that time. And I stayed on as a non-executive for a transitionary period of a couple of years. And Brait went on to do great things. It was Christo's billion and John Nodder running it and pretty much the same team. And they went on to do some great things, and then the thing didn't work out. But I was gone by then, so it wasn't my drama. But that transition was quite a complicated change, and but it worked. It worked really well, and the business went from, I think when I left, like 21 rand a share to about 180 rand a share over a period of a couple of years. Then it came down again. And then
you've got a lot of scars. I mean, we look at you again, as I was saying in the beginning. You look at someone and you think, they've always been successful. They've never had challenges and so on. What are the biggest lessons that you learned during that time?
So definitely more scars than I'd want, but you learn from each of them. And I think that I think a big one is that that I keep on looking for in leaders is this resolve. It is not all going to be easy.
Yes.
And if you're going to back down on the first punch in the face, don't go into the battle because you're not going to make it. I think there's definitely a need to have resolve and have persistence and all those old world things.
Yes.
It is going to be hard. And if you feel you're not up for that, and disposition wise you might not be up for it, then don't do it because it's going to come your way. So I think that's something inherent to my mind. I always look for that in a leader is somebody that's got that sort of resolve. I think the other thing that we keep on learning and we can't get enough of is every one of these culture surveys you see, they'll talk about how important communication is, and this organization doesn't communicate well enough. I say people can't get enough of it, but I think that the need to communicate consistent messages, multiple forums, town halls, dinners, lunches, particularly in times of difficulty, it's really important to communicate widely and confidently with the people around you. People are looking for someone that's in charge. And I think this ability to communicate well, choose your words well, be positive, I think is a very, very important trait in a human, in a leader. Yeah.
Yes.
And the last thing I'll say is it's a subtle thing that I think a lot of people that haven't done what you and I've done on Crew is they look at the boards that we sit on, the company, they think it's all easy. Yes. We know that there are proper issues that crop up in companies. And it might be someone sues you, or a regulator takes you on, or you find a little bomb in this business where someone's behaved badly and there's been theft. And the ability to, in a commercial way, resolve what I call wicked problems, I think is a very, very important trait. There's not, you've seen it, I've seen lots of these things in the workplace. So I think being able to apply a commercial mind to tractable business problems, I think is a very, very important trait in a business leader. So I feel that I've kind of learned lots of those from what we've been through, but I've put those three things as things I think are really, really important.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. Maybe we should just shift the conversation now towards the things that are burdening me. Maybe we can start with race. You were lucky enough to grow up in an environment where you were conscientized about these things, which is why it's been such a pleasure working with you, because I never felt I was dealing with a white person. I thought I was just dealing with someone who sees me for who I am. Maybe we can just talk about the race issue. Although we've made a lot of progress, I suppose, in South Africa in terms of working together, and there are many positive stories, but the race issue is still an issue. How do you think we can start just dealing with the race issue? Because race relationships generally, because I feel that if we can get past that, we can get into how do we grow the economy together? Because there's always this suspicion, this I need to protect myself or protect my privilege and so on. But just not talking about the economy now, the race issue. What do you think we can do to improve the race relationships?
Nonku, thanks for those comments. I must say that I find that I know on race and gender, just by virtue of being an old white guy, I often don't get it right. And my daughter tells me on the race thing, on the gender thing, you might express something in a certain way, but it's certainly something that it's something that's very much on our mind as South Africans. So I think we start out with a complicated set of circumstances. Let's try and be unemotional about it. It is complicated. I didn't go to school with black kids, Yes. Not my fault, but that's what happened. At university, I think there were 4 poor black kids, and I felt desperately sorry for them. They're sitting, on their own somewhere else amongst thousands of white kids. It's just crazy stuff. And even as I described in early work years, you see it in different environments. I think that I think that there's been that complexity of the races not mixing in an equal way for for hundreds of years. So it does present a very complex set of circumstances. Funny enough, I think that one is that I think time, and the older I get, the more I think we need more time on this thing. If I observe, my kids and their life experience has been much better than mine. And I look at my grandkids now and I look at their classroom, it's even more so, So I think that you'll find, and that's largely time. I think time has actually dealt with that. So I think and we go and look at our organizations. I was so moved actually, I know quite a lot about PPC, but, and its history, but when Matthias asked Nona, myself, and Jabu to go and talk to the leadership group at the slurry plant, I think there were about 63 people, and I did my normal thing. I'm standing looking up, but I'm doing race counting. How many of those 63 are? And I think that there were probably like 48 of color,
Wow.
And that plant, which is probably the biggest cement plant in the Southern Hemisphere, is run by an African woman in her 40s.
Wow.
And I reckon if you went back 20 years, that 63 is 60 of them were white Afrikaans men, and that again is time. I think time. So I think time's a factor. So I feel better about giving ourselves the patience to actually work through some of this. The second thing I think is that my deep conviction is that economic growth deals with a lot of this, because it doesn't become a question of, do we choose a black person or a white person? You've got to choose a person.
Yes.
And, you get into this environment where anyone with enterprise is going to get sucked into this vortex of opportunity in South Africa. I do recall in the 70s when the economy was growing, my dad had a small business and you wanted to find a fitter and turner and you had to pay them 4 times what you would have paid them 10 years ago because they didn't exist. And so I think what you'll find, I believe, is if our economy grows at 4 or 5%, we'll find in that vortex, people get sucked in. And anyone that's, as I said, has got enterprise and skill will end up getting drawn into this vortex of opportunity. So I think I continue to believe that that's a big factor. And then I suppose there is something about, what all of us can do.
Yes.
And I particularly focus on white folk, as to what we can do is and it sounds like a small thing, but in all the forums you're in and where you're with people that are of your color is to have these sort of conversations, for people to understand, this privilege and what it means and what your obligation is on the other side. At board meetings, or wherever you are, is to have the conversations and try where you can to make sure that you make something of an impact. It might be diversity on your board, or diversity in the social club that you're busy with, or diversity on the school board that you're on. It's just to try where we can to develop that. I think that you can get into the conversation also on, let's say, B and affirmative action. So people have different views of it. I come out with a view of needing the laws need to tilt things in favor of people of color in South Africa. There's no doubt in my mind. Just if you look at the past and the exclusion from opportunity set, and again to talk about that at forums where people might have different points, is keep on pushing these points across. So I feel I'm sure there are more things that can be done, but that's kind of where I land on this thing, is to try and do those things. And if everyone does more of that, I think we end up in a better sort of place.
I always say that Black people and women, they go into spaces that were not prepared for them, and they just have to fit in. And there's a certain standard that has been set that is based on whether it's a masculine culture or white culture, or whatever. And I always say that white people are the most spoiled people I know, because they don't want the opportunity to grow and learn and understand. Because if you come into our space, whether you're a woman or a Black person, we have to fit in with the culture that we have here. And unfortunately, we miss out on the diversity because people bring different things. So if I'm not allowed to be my authentic self, then you're not going to get the best out of me, right? I mean, as we are saying, you want to know the person, who they are, and what their strengths are. And I just feel that sometimes Black people are always going upstream because they have to sort of shadow a big chunk of who they are, because white people and men are not prepared to grow. Because, I mean, it's really a fear of being challenged. I am comfortable and not prepared, because we have to meet each other halfway for us to make this thing work. So then Black people and women must run that mile to you. We are not prepared to meet them halfway. So what is your comment towards that?
No, I think it's a very good point. My daughter often makes this comment to me, that she made this, in fact, for the first time when she was working at KPMG, and she said, I feel bad about this, but it's so easy for me to talk to these white partners because I kind of grew up with them. I know, how much humor is right and what respect is and what respect isn't. And my Black colleagues weren't brought up to know that because they grew up in a different environment. So to be conscious about it, I think is a starting point. I'm absolutely conscious of it. I feel that it's about those things, also about language. If you talk about, so when you talk about white men are fortunate, I say white English-speaking men are fortunate. I mean, you look at the Afrikaners too. They've also had to do everything in a second language. And Black people mostly everything in a second or third language. So it is also about language. It's about culture, about how we deal with older people, how we culturally deal with peers. What is the right level of being assertive? What is the right level of respect? All of those things are deeply ingrained in what you're talking about here. So I think that a starting point is to understand it. But the best way of dealing with it is to get diversity in your leadership, because that's the thing that I've noticed changes it. And one of the things I really credit Mteto Nyati in teaching me in our time at Altron was he used to talk about diversity, and I've become a deep believer in diversity for this reason, is because this leadership at the top, it is about skills, but it's also about creating harmony and getting the best out of everybody in the organization. And if it's, of a certain kind of culture and it's all white men, it's not going to get that. So I do believe this need to get diversity of gender and race at the top, I think is very, very important in any organization. I think that's a good starting point.
So did you see it making a difference in terms of, making diversity work? You then get the best out of everyone.
Absolutely. And you'll find in that leadership group, someone will understand, if it's a Black guy or Black woman, she's going to understand this point exactly about those people are finding this a bit intimidating. We need to adjust our process or how we deal with each other or how we set goals for each other to actually make that work. And by the way, if you work in multinational organizations, you find similar themes. If you're talking about, having the Italians who work with the French and the Greeks and all that, there's a thematic thing in there about people feeling uncomfortable in someone else's culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so this thing you're talking about, I notice it. I'm personally interested in it. And I think the way of dealing with it is diversity in your leadership. You get diversity in leadership, a lot actually flows, I think, from that.
Yeah, maybe we can just share a little bit. I mean, I've been watching you at Value Capital, what you've done, how you've brought in Black people in leadership positions. Now it's being led by a woman, a Black African woman, which is something rare in this country. What motivated you to do that, and how has it worked to change this narrative?
So when Sam and I started, you were there at the beginning. So you saw us at the beginning. When we started this journey together, it was our wish to actually build something that was going to be catalytic in the capital markets, and that was going to showcase it in a South African way. So with diverse leaders. So we're very intentional about finding leaders that express this diversity. And we were just super fortunate to end up attracting a number of extraordinary professionals that were Black.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I credit Sam with a lot of it. I think that some of those folk might have felt a bit awkward about working for me. So I understood that. So I credit Sam with being vital in that mix. Is that we there's a lovely Afrikaans expression where they say "soort soek soort," meaning people look for their own kind.
Yes.
And I think that I always tell this joke: if you're a bank and you start a risk management unit and you put a Greek guy in charge, you'll come back in a year's time, there'll be 5 Greek people. It's how people are, it's like people are. So I think there's something around that cuts across all cultures about people trusting people of their own ilk. And so I credit Sam a lot and with a lot of this. And then these were people that were able to interest in our proposition. And I think a lot of people that are super capable, they do buy this. We want to make change. We want to be catalytic. We want to change companies for the better, and we want to be proud of it. And so I think that vision attracted a number of super impressive people, and just feel extraordinarily privileged to have met them and to have them now as partners. I mean, you've seen Nono in action. She's actually a formidable force, and there's more. There's Tapiwe, there's Monde, there's Sam. So we've got a team of extraordinary people. And I must say, I feel super proud to be their partners. And I say it with a lot of pride. I have been blessed to work with teams of professionals for a long, long time, but this is the most extraordinary group of professionals. And so I'm super proud to be part of that.
And that is general. I always say that, in all of these businesses, I had, great partners, but the partners I started Gobodo with that beginning, they are the best team I've ever had. So I don't know whether you're talking about it in that context, not just the best Black team, but the best team.
That's the best team. I've had teams, and my early teams were mostly white teams. And this team happens to be mostly Black teams. So I think it's and it's this wonderful privilege of being able to choose your partners, when you start something, so which we're able to do. So, and so for me, it's been a most extraordinary blessing. It's not just diversity in race; it's also gender and it's also age. Other than Sam, I could be everyone's father there. So it's an extraordinary privilege to work with young people that are Black, that have different gender, and I regard it as the most extraordinary learning opportunity. And I think that when you look at how that place is run, we get to this point, I think it'll be a very comfortable place, I hope, for Black people and for women. Yeah.
Yes.
And that then is going to expand our opportunity set to bring in an abundance of even more talent going forward.
Which talks to just allowing more Black people, more women into top leadership positions. That's the only way we're 100%. Going to change this environment. Thank you so much.
It's the only way, Nonku. You can say whatever you like, but if you want to transform an organization, you need to start there, because that then catalyzes for all the reasons that we've spoken about. it's very, very hard to build from the bottom. There needs to be black people at the top.
Yeah. Lastly, as we're about to close, we're very worried about the country. And I know you are deeply worried about the country, and you are committed to, seeing the country move in the right direction. And we can, I really don't want to spend time in this series just blaming this, blaming that. We can play the blame game. But in your view, what do you think can be done to just move South Africa forward? We seem to be running around the same circles, talking about the same problems, and there's no real vision or commitment that I see to put all of these things aside and save South Africa.
I wish you and I've broken our heads trying to solve this thing, and I still don't know what the solution is. But there's some days I feel a bit more optimistic, and if the optimistic days would be days where we acknowledge where we've come from, and acknowledge that the political change is a very hard thing, and this is a long-term game. And what has happened to South Africa, it hasn't fallen over. Other countries had fallen over, and the issues that we wrestle with are, in world terms, extraordinarily difficult ones. So I feel that things might be getting a little bit better, just a tiny bit better. The economy is starting to grow a bit more, and I think we're going to find a political contestation in the local elections. I think it's going to be very interesting next year. Whatever political persuasion you are, let's hope we have proper contestation in our big metros. We might have different coalitions that are to what we have at the moment, and new people coming in. I do often feel that our political parties haven't done what they should have for us, and therefore we start something new. I keep on thinking that, but I think starting something new is so hard. So I end up feeling... So what do we do? I think the one thing we all ought to do, I feel, given as South Africans, even if you're not a political person, is to join a party and make it a better party, whatever party you want. But I just think this thing of saying it's someone else's problem is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So I think getting involved with a political party and being a force for good in the party, whatever party you choose, I think is a very good thing for all of us to do. I think that is where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. The political parties contest for power. I think it's a very important thing to do. And then I think there are lots of other things we can all do. Is that yes, the politics is important, but in all of what we do, as directors of companies, as leaders of businesses, I think in our everyday life we can do things to strengthen and take on causes. So it might be a small thing, but please, South Africans, get involved in an NGO or in some form of charity or some community thing. Do a little bit. If everyone does a little bit, I think we'll do a lot better. I just point to a couple of small examples that don't sound meaningful, but I think they are. So before the Springbok All Blacks games last year, a couple of guys, black guys, were instrumental in getting the train going from Park Station to Ellis Park, so that people could get on the Park Station and go to Ellis Park. Sounds like a small thing, but that's what happens in proper cities. Someone goes to the train station, they get on the train, they get to the stadium. They also then got involved with Johannesburg local authority and NGOs to tidy up Ellis Park, the whole area environment there. So everyone arrives there, and it wasn't actually miserable. It was great, and it was clean, and people were smiling, and it was safe, and that was community activities. People saying, let's not wait for government to do it. Let's not wait for the local authority to do it. We do it ourselves. So I feel that we're in a society where we mustn't keep on feeling someone else is going to sort our problems out. It's just get involved in something. Mm-hmm. It might be your old school, wherever you went to school, is get involved with it, make it better, teach the kids something, help buy books, laptops, or whatever it is. We can all do something. So I think doing something in addition to joining a party, I think it's very important for all of us to do.
Wow. What are your closing remarks as we close?
Gratitude. Thanks, Nonku. It's been a privilege to be your friend and to know you, and wish you well with your series. And I hope I haven't spoken too much. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just feel that so much has come out of this conversation that will be helpful to those who are listening. And thank you so much again.
Pleasure, Nonku. Privilege. Thanks so much.